Welcome to the Jukebox Podcast from WP Tavern. My name is Nathan Wrigley. Jukebox is a podcast which is dedicated to all things WordPress. People, the events, the plugins, the blocks, the themes, and in this case, making the web a better place for those who are deaf. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can do that by searching for WP Tavern in your podcast player of choice, or by going to wptavern.com/feed/podcast, and you can copy that URL into most podcast players. If you have a topic that you'd like us to feature on the podcast, I'm keen to hear from you and hopefully get you or your idea featured on the show. Head to wptavern.com/contact/jukebox and use the form there. So on the podcast today, we have Elena Panciera and Chiara Pennetta. Elena is a freelance consultant specializing in inclusive and accessible languages. She champions linguistic inclusivity, advocating for simplifying language to aid understanding for non-native speakers across all languages. She believes in providing tools to make text more comprehensible for everyone. Chiara has been a special needs educator for the past 2 years. Deaf since infancy, Chiara underwent cochlear implant surgery 4 years ago, significantly improving her hearing. This transformative experience deepened and altered her connection to her deaf identity and spurred her to explore issues of deafness and accessibility. They're joining us to discuss the important topic of accessibility online. Accessibility is often an overlooked aspect of web development and event planning, and there are significant challenges and opportunities in making content accessible to diverse audiences. Elena and Chiara walk us through their personal journeys and professional insights, shedding light on the varying needs within the deaf community. Chiara shares her experiences of navigating a world that is increasingly leaning towards video content, and how platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube have improved accessibility through automatic captioning. Elena highlights the importance of these features not only for deaf individuals, but also for a broader audience that benefits from reading captions. We talk about the implications of the European Accessibility Act, set to revolutionise accessibility requirements for websites. What will this mean for developers and content creators? Are captions enough, or should we aim for sign language interpretations as well, despite their complexity and cost? We also talk about the essential principles of simplification in transcription and how AI tools are shaping how we deliver accessible content. Chiara emphasises the diverse needs of individuals with hearing impairments and why aligning transcriptions with the original content is crucial. Towards the end, we explore technologies which are improving communication for the deaf community and the practical steps WordPress events can take to be more inclusive. Whether you're a web developer, event planner, or just passionate about accessibility, this episode is for you. If you're interested in finding out more, you can find all of the links in the show notes by heading over to wptavern.com/podcast, where you'll find all the other episodes as well. And so, without further delay, I bring you Elena Panciera and Chiara Pennetta. I am joined on the podcast today by Elena Panciera and Chiara Pennetta. Very nice to have you both with me.
Thank you.
We're in WordCamp Europe. It is Saturday, so it's the final day of the conference, and I'm talking to these two fine people about a topic that they spoke about. It was yesterday, I think, and so we're going to get into that topic in a moment, and it's a topic that I confess I don't know very much about, so hopefully they're going to tell me and educate me a lot about it. But before we do that, one at a time, could I ask you just to introduce yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you come from, where you live, what you do for a living, that kind of thing. So let's go.
Hi, I'm Elena Panciera, and I'm a freelance consultant. I'm expert about inclusive and accessible languages. And well, I work as a freelancer, so I'm a trainer. I make consultancies about accessibility and about how to be kind of respectful with language. This is what I do.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chiara Pennetta. I am 30 years old from Italy. I work as a teacher in special needs education since 2 years ago. I studied ancient Greek and Latin, and then I specialized in teaching Italian as a second language. But 4 years ago, I got 2 cochlear implants because I am deaf since I was 1.5 years ago. 5 years ago, in fact, I chose to try and improve my hearing with this surgery, which is called cochlear implant. In that moment, I became more hearing from a medical point of view, but I became also more deaf from an identity point of view. And so I chose to delve more into the topic of deafness and accessibility. And that was when I opened my Instagram page, which is called The Undeaf, because I don't feel hearing nor deaf. And that was when I met Elena. And we started studying and working together to make the world a more accessible place. And that was also when I decided to be a teacher for the people with disabilities in high school here in Italy.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask you, you said that your medical deafness had improved, but I think you said identity. Did you say identity? Your identity deafness or something. What did that mean? What did you mean by that?
I think that deafness is considered a disability by most people. So the lack of hearing, but deafness is also a community, a culture, and a language, because if you start studying sign language like I did 4 years ago, you will find out that there is a new whole world to discover about deaf identity. For me, that was life-changing. It's a paradox because I found out about my deaf identity only when I improved my hearing. It's a paradox, I know, but my cochlear implants are more visible than the hearing aid I had before. And so my deafness became more visible, but also more invisible because my speech improved, my access to the world of sounds improved also my identity, like I said before.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it. So during the course of this interview, I will be asking questions, and it doesn't really matter who wants to take it, but thank you for the introductions. So let's begin then. So the first question that I've got really is, well, I should probably introduce what you spoke about at WordCamp Europe. Your topic was called Digital and Linguistic Accessibility Techniques and Strategies for Deaf People. So we're going to try and explore that a little bit. And my first question then is, what kind of experiences on the web are different if you are deaf? So I'm in the fortunate position to have good eyesight. I wear glasses, but I have good eyesight. You know, my hands and my legs all work. I can hold a mouse, I can type on a keyboard, and my hearing is good. So I genuinely don't know what it would be like to browse the internet, to move around online if I couldn't hear. So could you just describe the difference it would be for me if I had deafness?
Sure. I think that the biggest difference is about all video and sound musical content, of course. So anything that you experience with your hearing is different if you don't have hearing at all or are partially deaf. Any video, any podcast, of course, any web content which is accessible by audio feed needs to be supported with captions or transcription or like signals. I don't know, maybe it is not web related, but in movies, when you have captions and someone knocks at the door, the captions signal that there is someone knocking. So sound signals and transcription is really important. I think that that's the most important thing to say. But yesterday, Elena and I really focused that in many occasions, captions and transcription are not enough because many people who are born deaf and maybe don't use hearing aids sometimes are not proficient in understanding an oral spoken language, even if it is in a written form. So they can have struggles in understanding complex and long sentences with complex syntax and vocabulary. Elena, which is expert in language accessibilities, really gave tools to write in a way that is accessible to people who don't have a high level of proficiency in understanding written text.
Right. So the assumption then that if I, for example, produce a video and the word I'm going to use is verbose, meaning I use too much language. I'm talking, but my sentences are complicated and what have you. Are you suggesting then you need to bear in mind making it more straightforward? Because if I'm reading it, it might also be the case that my level of cognition, understanding what I'm reading, may also impact my ability to understand that content. So whoever wants to take that.
Yes, actually, we have to keep in mind that not everybody has the same level of proficiency in any language, and especially in Italian, because in English it's quite easier to have shorter sentences, and since it's a very commonly used language amongst a lot of people that have other languages as first languages, English is more simple. But in Italian, for example, we commonly use very long sentences with a lot of clauses that are not coordinate clauses and subjunctives and a lot of difficult words. The oral Italian is simpler, and the written Italian, we tend to use more difficult words and more difficult structures. And so it's important to keep it simple and to try to think that not everybody have Italian as a first language. And this happens also for every other language. So for English, but also for German, for Spanish, and so on. And so we have tools that can help us trying to make a text simpler. We have also artificial intelligence that can help us. There are ChatGPT and Gemini, for example, but also tools that are integrated into WordPress. For example, Yoast or SEMrush have tools that help simplify text and choose simpler words and more common words, for example.
Can I ask you a question about this podcast? So when I have finished editing this, I will make a transcription and I will try to make it perfect, exactly what you say. However, sometimes, because you're speaking in your native language is Italian, I sometimes take the position that it's better for me to translate it into the English that I would like you to have said if you were an English speaker. What do you think about that? I'm sometimes faced with the difficult thing, okay, I think they meant to say it this way, so I'll write it that way, whereas you didn't actually say it that way. What should I do?
Actually, this is a very interesting question, because I think there are also different positions about that, because sometimes I've been told that it's better to have very, very transcriptions that are perfect. And so they transcript exactly what the speaker said. But actually, in terms of accessibility, maybe it could be more interesting, even simplify a little bit the language, so make the sentences shorter and, I don't know, adapt a little bit the transcription.
I would like to add something on this topic. I don't know if you ever noticed that in many movies, when you buy the DVD or Netflix too, I think, you can choose from normal captions, basic captions, and captions that are all called subtitles for the hearing impaired.
I have not come across that, so this is new. It's interesting. Keep going, yeah.
Sometimes you have two kinds of transcription for movies or TV series, because basic captions transcribe literally everything that the actors say, while captions for deaf people are often simplified in vocabulary and grammar, because maybe the proficiency in language is a bit different and they need a language structure which is more simple and accessible.
And also, I would imagine keeping up, being able to read at the speed that somebody is saying something. So let's imagine a movie on Netflix. If an actor is speaking fairly quickly and you are transcribing every single word, it's hard to read at the speed of speech. If we just take out unnecessary words and just sum up the idea behind it. That's really interesting because you have to have an opinion about what they intended to say and how much you can simplify it, because you might lose some of the context, but you can do both. You put the exact transcript, but you have the secondary choice, I'm going to use air quotes, the simpler version, fewer words, easier to understand, less complicated words, shorter words. That's really interesting. I had no idea that existed. Do you want to add something to that?
This is the principle of simplify and facilitate. So there are these two different concepts, simplification and facilitation. Simplification means that we adapt and change the original text. And with facilitation, we can add tools to help the reader understand the text, but the original text that remain the same. You can add glossaries, you can add another version, a simplified version, or a shorter version, because we could have also difficulties in keeping up the attention for a long time and to read a very long text. This could be difficult. So yeah, we have different tools to improve the accessibility. And actually, accessibility is multimedia and going across different tools and different medias. For example, the transcription is different from the audio, and also we can add graphics, illustrations, or visual tools to improve the understanding of a text.
What do these tools do? So I'm imagining that I've transcribed this and I've got my perfect, in air quotes, transcription. I'm really happy with it. Do I then just copy and paste what I've got, put it into a tool, click a button, and it will go through it with artificial intelligence, for example, and just shorten everything, make it more brief as we've just described? What do these tools do? And could you name a few? Because I've never heard of any of them, so I'd like to go out and find what some of them are.
Actually, yes, there are some tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or specific tools like Capito that can help you doing this in an automatic way. But actually, it's always better, in my opinion, to check what the artificial intelligence do. The human intelligence is still better than the artificial one. And actually, you can use your critical sense. I don't know if I can use this in English. Yes, because you can really think what is important. And maybe you can also ask, in your case, you could ask us, what would you mean with this sentence? Because it was not in a perfect English, so we can tell you and make it right. I don't know how to say, but let the mistakes be only in the oral podcast and make a better version in the written text.
Right. So a good example of that that's coming into my mind might be if both of us said, I don't know, the word like a lot. It's commonly used in English. We say like, and also, those kind of things. Would you want that to be kept in a transcription or even the audio? Because I tend to, when I edit this podcast, I tend to get rid of the bits, well, for example, of silence. There might be 5 seconds of silence where you think of your answer in this podcast episode. I take the position, let's get rid of that silence. Let's make it just so that one word follows the next word. And also I take out the ums and the ahs and the likes and think, I'm really making a completely new version of what you said. Is that a good idea? Would you prefer to listen to exactly what we record today? Or is it okay to edit things out? Is there a better way of doing it?
I think oral version of a thing and the written version or the painted version or the dance version of something are, of course, different things because they are different products. So we can't expect to be the same. It wouldn't be right. There are two different things, so it's normal. That's not the same thing because you perceive those two things with two different senses. And so I think it's right to delete the the like, because it will be not pleasurable to read a text full of and like. It depends also what is the main goal that you want to achieve with that text. It is more important that the people can understand what the vibe was or what the content was. I think that it is also really personal because, for example, I can hear pretty well with my cochlear implant. So I like my caption and my transcriptions to be really faithful to the original, because if I hear and at the same time I read, I like those two things to be the same. Or maybe if I watch a movie, I like that when I see the lips moving, I hear the same thing and I read the same thing on my captions. But other deaf people, or maybe other people who need other kind of accessibilities, like people with learning difficulties or people who with cognitive disabilities, they may need and want a different kind of test to more get to the point, to more understand it. So I think that it is impossible to have a solution which is perfect for everyone.
I guess one of the things that I could do if I had enough time and enough resources, I could also translate this from English and have it in Italian or Spanish or Portuguese or whatever language we can imagine. It will just be done in English, though. In a way, the ability to read a language gives you more options to make something visible, available to people from different cultures. If it's just a YouTube video with no captions, no subtitles, and it's just in English, only English people, or not English people, English-speaking people can understand that. If you throw in the captions and the subtitles, you can actually make the exact same piece of content available to the whole world if you could translate it into Chinese and Japanese and everything. But unfortunately, that's not going to be the case in this case. Okay, back to the questions. This may seem like a silly question because, as I said, I have good hearing. Does the amount of deafness, and I don't know what the correct word is for that, but for example, imagine somebody who has no hearing at all, or somebody who has partial hearing, maybe one ear isn't working as well, or if they can hear half of the sounds, or anything in between. Is there a difference there? Do we have to make things available in different ways? Just tell us what that's like.
Yeah, I think we should talk about deafnesses plural, because we have a wide variety of shades of deafness, mainly since when technology came in. I don't know, if 70 years ago we didn't have hearing aids and cochlear implants which work in a certain way. Today we have a wide amount of technology that can help retrieve our hearing. But even if two people with the same level of hearing loss use the same kind of hearing aid, it is not obvious that they could gain the same amount of hearing gain. So deafness is a wide word. It depends on when you lose your hearing, before or after the age in which children learn to speak. And so we have prelingual or postlingual deafness. And of course, you can lose your hearing at different levels. So mild or profound hearing loss are different. Or we have deafness for elderly people. So late in life, it's really a wide word. Some people learn sign language since they are little children because they are born in deaf families, into deaf culture. Some other don't, like I became deaf when I was 1 year and a half, and I was born in a hearing family. So I didn't learn sign language up until 4 years ago for my personal curiosity. That means that I learned how to speak through hearing aids and speech therapy. But I know many people who have the same amount of hearing loss as me from a medical point of view, but have really different speech ability and language ability. We have a very wide, a very big variety of deaf words.
So it feels to me like when the internet came along, I don't know, 1995 or something like that being a deaf person, you could access almost all of the internet because it was just images and text. That's how the internet began. But more and more, fast forward to 2005 or whenever YouTube came along, video content started to rapidly take over. And now with TikTok and apps and the phone that you've got in your pocket, it feels like there's more and more content that's inaccessible to deaf people. Is that a trend? Is it becoming harder to use the internet? Things like YouTube, like I say, and TikTok, is that kind of taking over and making it more difficult?
I don't think it is becoming harder. I think that maybe in the beginning when videos weren't captioned, yes. But now we have automatic captions on TikTok, on Instagram mostly, and on YouTube. So even if the content creator doesn't put on their captions or their transcription, it is possible to activate automatic caption or automatic transcription.
Can I just ask, do you need to tell TikTok or YouTube to do that? Or does it automatically do it for you?
Yes, it's the user responsibility because you have to click on a button to activate captions. But I think that deaf people life changed with the internet because I don't remember the name, but back in the old days, it was invented like a phone who transcribed the phone calls. And when we started having video calls, deaf people were so happy because they could call each other, seeing each other, and use sign language during their phone calls. And so communication really exploded. It was a right that came a bit later for the deaf community, the signing deaf community, of course.
I think that also the ability to read lips with video calls is a good accessibility sign. And captioning is getting better, actually. And also, captioning is not used only by deaf people. Actually, I am one of those people that need captions because otherwise I hate the vocal messages and I hate this kind of messages that are only oral. And so I prefer to read, and I'm not deaf, actually. So accessibility can really help a lot of people, even if they're not with disabilities.
From everything that you've said, it really does sound like technology has improved dramatically the life of people who are deaf. And obviously you said it's a spectrum. Yeah, when you mentioned about video calls, I hadn't even thought about that. But suddenly you can see the person, lip read maybe, but also the sign language. It just made communication over a distance suddenly possible. You could speak to people from all over the world, not rely on hearing, which of course on the phone call, the regular phone call, if you can't see it, you couldn't interact with it at all. Profound. So technology is really helping. And I've got to say, dear listener, in front of me, about 2 feet away, I don't know whose it is, but is a mobile phone. And the mobile phone is facing you two, and it's translating in real time. And I'm watching it now. You've just turned it around so that I can see. So it's 2 feet away. It must have the microphone switched on, and it's translating everything I'm saying, and it's translating it literally perfectly. It's astonishing. And this is what? Just Google? Just Google.
Yes, it's like a Google Transcribe. There is an app free on the Google Store. And this is my phone, actually, because I have an Android phone and she has an iPhone that is more accessible for other things, I think.
But whether you've got an Android phone or an iPhone, I am blown away by how good that is. And obviously I've never had to use it, so I've never really seen it. Can I just ask, dare I say, we're going off message a little bit. Would that also enable me to talk to you in Italian? So, for example, could it translate my English words and the text on the screen would then be Italian? Can it do that as well?
Well, no, I think that you can, I know that you can set the language in which you are speaking. So if you now start speaking in Italian, I have to switch on the app the language to Italian, and it will start transcribing in Italian or in any other language. But if I wanted a live translation too, I think I'd have to use a computer and open another app with artificial intelligence that could transcribe and translate at the same time. There are applications that can do that. I actually saw, maybe yesterday, I saw on the laptop of the people who are helping out in the speech on the track one. And they had an application, I think, That said, if you want to change on your device the language of the captions, you could. So I think that maybe people who couldn't understand English, because yesterday we spoke in English, and there were also captions on the main screen projected in English that transcribed like now. But I think that maybe you could download an app or something that also translates into another language. So this is all the work of artificial intelligence. So I think that maybe because languages are so rich and different, I think it's impossible to achieve a perfect translation for the main content. I think it's useful as well.
Genuinely, I'm astonished by how good that is. And it's enabling me, I mean, you could have had headphones in, but you've chosen not to, but I'm noticing that you're looking down at it. And so you're seeing and reading what I'm saying in real time. That is profoundly amazing. This kind of stuff must make life a lot more straightforward and a lot simpler. Yeah, that's absolutely brilliant. Off-piste again. How do we do at WordPress events helping out people who are deaf? Do we get it right? Do we have the right balance of, I don't know, sign language, captioning? Do we do pretty well, or is there work that we still need to do?
Well, I'm very happy with the captions, but I didn't see any sign language interpreter. I don't know if I didn't see any. That's my opinion, my experience, but I also didn't ask for it because even if I know sign language, I don't rely on it to access to the word. So maybe if I asked for it, it would be possible to gain an interpreter. But I think the problem is I only know Italian sign language. Since there are many sign languages in the world that I don't know, British or American sign language, I think it will be difficult to find an interpreter who can listen to English and then in his or her mind translate into Italian and then translate again into Italian sign language. There are people who can, amazing people, but it's not easy. Or we could ask for an international sign interpreter. And international sign is not an actual language, but it's a mix of different sign languages, mostly based on ASL, American Sign Language. And so I think that I could understand it, but I never tried. But I'm really happy with the organization. It was the first time for me to attend a WordPress conference, nevertheless, WordCamp Europe. So I felt really welcome and my needs were met. So
good. Yeah, well, I'm pleased to hear it. I've no clue really as to whether or not at some events they do have sign language. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really thought about that. It would have to be, the sign language would have to be in English or American English, whichever. And then you would also have to understand that as somebody that was using sign language. You'd have to not only be able to use the English sign language, but then presumably you'd have to translate it in your own head into Italian. So that would make life really difficult.
Yeah, actually, in this kind of event, I think that the best solution is to ask people attending the conference, what do you need? Because actually, maybe you could have a person from France that's communicate with French Sign Language and they could need French Sign Language. And so it's easier to meet their need and to ask a French Sign Language interpreter to help them, because otherwise it could be really, really expensive, to translate versus toward every language.
Yeah, you can imagine there'd be 15 people standing on the stage.
Exactly.
The French translation or the sign language, the English, the, I don't know, Portuguese or whatever. Yeah, that could be interesting. So I know neither of you are lawyers. We established that at the beginning, but I'm near the end now. My question is all about website builders, people who build websites. That's what most of us are here for. We're building websites using WordPress to do that. Is there any responsibility, any legal things that we need to know about? I know that in 2025, we've got the European Accessibility Act. Will it become required, for example, with video to have captions, things like that? Do you know? And I stress you're not lawyers, we understand. But do you know if we as website builders are compelled to do that? I know that we should do that. It would be the right thing to do and the moral thing to do. But I think sometimes it's easy to not do those things because it's cheaper, quicker, all of those things. So do you know if there's any compulsion, any legal reason that we must do this?
Actually, yes. From the 2025, we have to think in a different way about accessibility because there is the European Accessibility Act that is going to be followed. We have to follow this act. Actually, there are different levels of accessibility, and the captions, for example, they're quite simple and quite cheap. With artificial intelligence, for example, a translation in sign language would be another level of accessibility that is not mandatory. It depends on how the budget is and how also the aim of the company is, because maybe if a company knows that its public, its audience is mainly or a huge amount of people is deaf, it could decide to invest some money into having a sign language interpreter, for example, that is not mandatory, but the captions, well, are supposed to be there. And yeah, also other things, transcriptions, but yeah.
We'll have to wait and see, won't we, how well it's enforced next year, because we'll have the legislation, but it'll be interesting to see if people adhere to it, and if they don't adhere to it, whether or not they get, well, punished, for want of a better word. We'll just have to see how that goes. I think with the time coming up to nearly the hour, we'll knock it on the head, as we say in the UK. We'll end it there. But thank you for speaking to me about this today. I'm going to be really curious what you make of the transcription and the edit of the audio that I do from this. I'm fascinated to see whether I over-edited it, whether I took out the ums and the ahs and the silences that we had. We're going to edit some mistakes out and things like that. But I'm more curious about what you think of the transcription that I do, and whether or not it's what you would have liked it to have been, or whether or not I overdid it. So let's wait and see. I'll send it to you before it comes out. But thank you so much for chatting to me today, both of you. I've really enjoyed it and I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you to you.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure to be here.